can't really tell you how ideas come into my head when I'm talking about Grace, aka Werevlog. And I mentioned Bob LcSbanD, and I mentioned maybe him maybe playing like a police officer, but I think maybe he's a little old. What I thought about even maybe better if I could include Bob, because I think he's such a great actor, is writing another role for him. And this is a very interesting role for our times and everything, because it does deal with some police interaction and stuff. The movie does. It mostly deals with the werewolf. And I'm not saying Bob LcSbanD would play the werewolf. I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. The werewolf isn't played by really anyone till the end, and I'll tell you about that later. You have to read the script. There is a scene where Grace Oldman III, who I'd like Gary Oldman to play, is playing a werewolf hunter, and he takes a friend. He befriends this blacksmith known as John Blacksmith from Portland, Oregon, and they get to Texas, where he gets so excited and into the espionage of finding this werewolf, because they spy on this UFC fighter thinking that he's an actual werewolf because of a tattoo that he has, because Gerald has studied gypsies and all this stuff, and he knows that that tattoo only is related to the curse of the lycanthrope. So they're there on the property, or near the property, of Grace LcSbanD, who is a UFC fighter. There's no way they can get in. They're with an Uber driver. So they override their Uber driver to bust in through the gate in their vehicle. They ram the gate and they get through. Of course, the authorities are called. So in this case, what I thought would be interesting is, because of the fact that Grace LcSbanD is such well, he's famous, and then his spouse, who is played by Rainey Love, spouse is Rainey Love. I don't know who. Maybe Jennifer Lawrence or something, but is kind of like, or maybe Linda, but is kind of like an ex-rock star. So anyway, they have money because she's big in the Bill Jack dog food business, which is a lot of money, and they're rich, so they're millionaires, obviously. So when they arrive with a special unit. So the officers arrive because it's special situation, and they have to interview Grace LcSbanD about the ramming of the gate. The car gets so out of control, and the whole situation, the Uber driver trying to take back the car actually rams into the front patio of the house and destroying the patio, destroying the front door, property damage. So I was thinking about maybe casting Bill LcSbanD as kind of like a new social worker kind of character that has been hired onto departments to handle specialized cases. Don't know the name of it yet. I'm gonna have to invent all this. It's kind of almost like a lawyer, but he shows up and he's older. Okay, so he's not really kind of, like an officer, but he has the two officers with him, which could be easily Will Ferrell and maybe another Saturday Night Live guy, just for the scene. And but I want to take it serious. I'm not just going for the comedy. And so they show up, and could be any other Saturday Night Live guy. We could audition. But anyway, they show up, and Grace is flipping out because he wants the guys arrested, and they have like their own YouTube show, so they're kind of like media, and they can't exactly do that for certain reasons. And he has to explain why they can't arrest these guys. They've already busted in to their property. They've already busted into their door. Major crime. These guys should big time go to prison. But because there was mechanical failure with the vehicle, and they're being represented, they should have been out in front of that property, and it was also dealing with Uber. The guy has to explain to Grace that they can't actually arrest these guys. And so he's kind of like a middleman, which I think is a good job for him. I know he's getting older, so he'd have these glasses, and he would come up and talk to Grace while Grace is yelling and screaming, doing pretty much acting like a werewolf. So we don't know if he's a werewolf. And then John Blacksmith, who I'd want Post Malone to play, would be like, we know you're a werewolf, man. We know, it's you. It's kind of a Lost Boys situation a little bit, because they're kind of young. They're young at heart. I think Gary Oldman there is trying not to laugh and keeping it together, but actually, in this case, Gerald Oldman III, the character, would be taking it very serious. So he would be, they would be ready to get him, because they're trying to explain to the officers that Grace is a werewolf, So that situation comes, so the Bob LcSbanD character comes in, and he's explaining, and he does it in a very serious way. I think it'd be like hilarious. And he's like, well, why can't you get this? So I have to rework that scene. But he's like, why can't you arrest him? Get him off. You know, and then Grace, you know, threatens to cut their heads off with a reciprocating saw. And then he has to go, no, you can't say that. And so there's acting as a middleman to try to create peace. Eventually, what ends up happening is they're escorted off Grace's property, and then they have to deal with all the damage and stuff like that. And they take photos of all the damage and everything like that. So they claim it was mechanical failure. The car, you know, lost control. They show signs of that. It did happen to an Apple store a while back, and the guy somehow, the car went into the Apple store, and I don't know how they dealt with the thing, but it almost hurt some people. And it almost happened, but it's also happened to my dad, because my dad lived on a hill, or at the bottom of the hill, and the curve of the hill went downward, of course, and our house was at the bottom of the hill, and then there was like a round curve for the road. And many times people just go too fast, and they would fly through, you know, the fence, and knocking over the columns and tumbling into the yard. We had a huge front yard. Happened a few times, and people were just, you know, no one went to jail over it. You know, it was just mechanical failure. It was the way the road was and things like that. So that's going to be a good scene, and I've already written a good chunk of it, but I'm going to have to bring that in. And if Bob takes the role, then we're in, you know. So I'd have to get it onto his lap, because I know he's an actor, but he's basically Paramount. And then, of course, I still kind of am iffy if I want to play Grace or if Cooper. And if I offered St. Patty to Cooper and he's really hard bent and really wants to play Grace, then I could talk to him about it, and then maybe I could play St. Patty, because St. Patty's kind of a chunky guy, and he does get killed by the werewolf. And one of the two, you know, even it would be big if it was that big of a production. Even if I got St. Patty, I probably would still be pretty satisfied. It'd be a kind of a Quentin move, you know, to do that rather than take Grace. But we'll have to see ultimately. I'll have to find out. But I mean, I'm still writing that scene. Okay, now whether I go St. Patty the Great or I go Grace, it's still up in the air. But if I did go Grace, then I need at least 4 months. I need an advance. I could probably train here. I know this is like The Fighter, Mark Wahlberg, but it's really not that serious of a fighting film. It's more of a werewolf film. I got to pick up some Tommy hamburgers, but I could train here for. I think I could get whipped up and ready to go in 4 months, because I'd look like a realistic fighter. Although we don't have to be bodybuilders in the ring. Bradley chose St. Patty. I think he's ready for both. I'm sure he is. He's even though he's almost 50, we're both. I mean, I'm not exactly Sylvester Stallone, but he kind of is. So I know he could do either. Grace is kind of out of shape. He's retired. So I would lean probably towards Grace. St. Patty's in shape the entire thing until the werewolf kills him. So if he's signed on with St. Patty, I'd be pretty happy. If he argued for Grace and says, look, you know, I want Grace, then I would say, well, then I'd have to be St. Patty. And then I can work on other projects later, because I was thinking about right after this project, the sooner we get started, I was going to also recast Bob LcSbanD and a little piece I want to do in Czech Republic called The Jew Hunter, and Paul and the Boy, which is about a actor, jeweler, amateur photographer that gets found out by a Jew hunter during 1940s Paris. I haven't started the script on that one, but I'd want to talk to him about it. Pretty serious piece. I got the idea from a filmmaker out in NYU back in the early 90s. Probably want to go into that one. I would shoot that one in Czech Republic. They still have bullet holes in the wall in Czech Republic, in walls and stuff. They have bullet holes like by Charles Bridge and all kinds of stuff. So it'd be really cool to turn some of that into the real thing. And Anyway, that's something I would really want to get into. And then, you know, I could be even part of that. I could even maybe play the Jew hunter. Bob would probably play the actor, photographer, and the jeweler that gets kind of busted and saves the life of this young boy by getting him documents and getting him out of the country before they can send him off to Auschwitz. Anyway, it has like a real kind of dreamy ending where he's standing in front of the gates of Auschwitz. It looks kind of like hell. It has that Arbeit, you know, set you free, all that kind of stuff. And he's looking up, and then these B-52s are coming over, these dark B-52s, and it has this like the sound of like liberation, but in his eyes you see there's this dark sadness, you know, something about that. I'm a big Kurt Vonnegut fan, so anyway, that's a possibility for second feature. I think Grace would be fun. My argument is that it has some stuff that is talking about law enforcement. It does have some secret messages, political messages, and things like that. So I think there's some importance to the script. So it will be written. I will finish it for sure. If Gerald signs on, I'm sorry, if Gary Oldman signs on, then everybody signs on because everybody wants to work with Gary Oldman. So I'll leave it to Gary. You know, I'll hopefully get it on his lap. And if he reads it, then, you know, we'll see what happens. It'd also be cool for those small parts to throw in Anthony Hopkins and Sir Ian McKellen, because that's for the bar sequence, the tavern, which I already wrote that. I do need to rewrite the sequence when Grace confronts, you know, the police and wants to have John Blacksmith and Gerald arrested for the trespassing, even though they claim it's mechanical failure on the car. And I guess the Uber driver plays along, you know, so everyone kind of goes home safe. That's some important stuff because it shows a different side of the police. I know that I've had some hefty, kind of horrible things to say, but I think we need something like that to address how the social worker aspect of policing can be, you know, seen in a movie, you know. And so there's a social worker that's on case that keeps, you know, them from fighting because of what happened. He immediately he's called out. He's an older guy. Be a great role for Bob Balaban. It would be great. I'm a big fan of Bob. I just became a big fan of him after I saw Thin Ice. And then I started researching him on Wikipedia, and it's like, oh, this guy's basically one of the big dudes in Paramount. I was like, cool. So I kind of struck some oil just being a fan of him on that one, even though I think he would be great in a werewolf film. Also, I don't know if Christopher Guest does drama. You know, I know he does comedy. He's one of our funniest guys ever. If he could jump on board later on with the Jew hunter thing, it would be interesting. We'd all have to fly it to Czech Republic, so it'd be a European, I think it'd be a European thing. It'd be cool to do that, do something European. I've been to Czech Republic. It's a great place. It's wonderful. I mean, the just everything in Czech Republic is just it's like, you got to go there. It's like walking back in time. Anyway, that's an option, you know, for later on. Now, I've got all these other projects lined up. I guess I might as well reveal some of them. Of course, a personal piece would be Deep on Ellum, which I wrote that screenplay too. And, you know, I would touch that up during production. And that one's set mostly in Dallas, and that's about my childhood. I really would like to do that one too, eventually, and I hopefully direct that one, you know, and be behind it in some way. Probably like play a cop in it, or, you know, maybe the DJ or something like that. Wanted to get Morrissey involved, see if Morrissey would play the DJ. There's a DJ scene in it, or I know Morrissey's real busy, but he's still on tour. Stephen Patrick Morrissey as in the singer-songwriter, but that's Deep on Ellum. And then my big project, which spans from Texas to Los Angeles to Vegas back to Dallas, Texas, is of course The Projectionist. And I would want to be behind that one as a director, and I wrote that one too. And I even attempted to make it, but we ran out of money really quick. And we needed uniforms and all different types of stuff that we were coming across. And I was trying to ride around it by creating these mime sequences and all this stuff. So anyway, The Projectionist is cool. That's another script. So I've got a few lined up. And then, of course, a dream project, of course, would be The Chosen One, which is another script, which I wrote probably coming out of high school, which deals a lot with the mystery of noir. It's just like just noir. You know, it deals with this guy named Peter Miller and a broken pocket watch, and he passes out in an alleyway and kind of forgets who he is, and he gets saved by these like Men in Black kind of people, or they pick him up off the street and they employ him, and he's hired to like find these dead people that are like in the back of trunks and broom closets and stuff, and take them through this door. And it's kind of a Twilight Zone like movie almost, like it's coming from like the Twilight Zone kind of thing. So that'd be like a 5th or 6th project. So I have, you know, my 10 projects. You know, I can name another few, my 10 or 20 projects. I'd say at least 10 that I could, you know, that I could sit there and have at least some script form on it. And, you know, going back and touching these up is like a lifeline, or it's like a lifelong project, you know. But you never know as a filmmaker. You know, you get that first big film and then you go off and all of a sudden your tastes change and you start writing just a bunch of romances, you know, like Frank Capra or whatever. You know, you never know which direction you're going to go, because when you get funding from studio and you're like, wow, I had all these projects lined up, well, then all of a sudden you start writing on new projects and you don't know what, you know what could come up. So, because I'm sure Francis Ford Coppola, what he's done, like a good 10 masterpieces at least. I'm sure he had a lot of different options, and he could have gone different directions on all kinds of different films. You know, like maybe did Godfather later in the career and started off with Dracula, you know, but he did Dracula later in his career. Godfather was the one that got him a lot of funding. Not for Apocalypse Now. I think Apocalypse Now would always have been in Francis Ford Coppola's list, you know, but The Godfather, of course, if he was doing it now, you know, it would still be accepted because it's a timeless piece. There's pieces that don't have time on them, you know. There's time pieces. There's pieces that are good for the time, and then there's pieces that are timeless. And The Godfather definitely would be one, and it's probably Dracula. Dracula would be, there's like no time on that, so it's just like it would be accepted like at any time. So you never know which avenue you're going to go, because you may want to say something about the current times, and then maybe you don't want to say anything about the current times. You know, maybe you want to get away from the current times, you know, and do your own auteur piece. Anyway, I was listening to Film Spotting. They're talking about M. Night Shyamalan, Knock at the Cabin. M. Night is definitely one of the most original Indian heritage, and he's a very original. That's the thing I give about M. Night. After doing Sixth Sense, of course, which was, I think, more of a commercial piece, which Sixth Sense is one of his best, but it's also kind of commercial. But all his other stuff has almost been like love letters to just auteurism, just being very unique. Do want to see Knock on the Cabin. I might delay a little bit. I might could do it. About 4 months of UFC training.